Let's be honest, most of your neighbors don't really care about pollinators or ecology. All they really want to know is how what you're doing affects their property values. At times it can be a little bit overwhelming and disheartening fighting the culture that surrounds you. How do you create gardens that support wildlife, feel like home, and still keep the peace with the neighbors? In order to find that balance, we're going to have to look at what your neighbors really see when they look at your yard. Their biggest concern when they start seeing you do something unconventional and against the surrounding culture is whether what you're going to do will be negatively impacting their and all of the surrounding property values. The good news is that what you're doing will not negatively impact your neighbors as long as you maintain it well. In fact, your native garden will actually increase your home's value and can potentially increase the value of your neighbors' homes, especially if you invest in things such as decks and patios. As long as you're doing native gardens, you're signaling environmental awareness and low maintenance. The only things that can really negatively impact your neighbors is making your property look neglected and abandoned. According to research from the University of Michigan, native plant gardens with strong visual cues of maintenance, so think clean edges, paths, signs, actually have a higher value perception than plain lawns. And this is actually increasing as millennials are moving into their home buying years. So if it's not the plants that is creating conflict between neighbors, what is it that's creating that tension? And more importantly, how do we get ahead of conflict before it starts? Often, it's just a simple conversation. Now, you might be sitting there and saying, this is my yard, I pay the mortgage, I get to decide what goes in my yard, I'm not going to let anyone tell me what I can and can't plant. And while I get that, first I want to say that there's zoning laws, which I don't even want to get started on zoning laws and what rocks they can kick. But they can, in fact, tell you what you can and can't put in your yard. So often, it's better to get on good terms with your neighbors wherever possible and where they're acting in good faith. Maybe some of their concerns are valid and you haven't fully thought through all the pieces, and they can kind of help you see that. Maybe they've got experience and insight that they can share. Maybe in your conversations, you actually inspire them to create a native garden of their own. You never quite know what your neighbors are going to say until you get to know them and you start building that community. For example, I have an 80-year-old neighbor who's an old retired Navyman. And one of the days where I was out getting rid of all of my grass and putting down mulch, he came over and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so I walked him through my plans and my dreams with the native garden, and he just kind of stared at me. And after a bit, he just looked and he said, "That'd be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what you put together." And that was it. Never the response I would have expected from him. But leave some room to be surprised. Again, you don't quite know what your neighbors are going to say until you give them the opportunity to say it. But sometimes things don't go as well, and you get a neighbor who's not going along with the plan. Doesn't matter what you show them about value and how what you're doing won't negatively impact their yard or their property values, and they're going to go against it. There's going to be nothing you can do to convince them otherwise. So in those situations, how do you handle that potential conflict? You really have three options, and I'm going to order them from the least combative to the most combative. And the least, of course, would be just go along with what they want. Have a lawn out front, just a conventional suburban landscape, and just set your neighbors' minds at ease. You can do whatever you want in your backyard, creating native spaces back there, but out front, you're more concerned about community and peace with your neighbors than you are about creating, a native garden and ecology. And I don't blame you at all if that's the path you choose to take. Sometimes it's worth it to just have peace at home. The next option is kind of an in-between. You can do your native planting on the foundation planting of your home. This is very conventional landscaping. More than likely, your neighbor really won't have much that they can complain about as long as you keep it to that foundation planting, just that strip around your home. Keep the rest lawn, keep it very clean, and that can be a very good compromise in order to still be accomplishing your goals with ecology, while also acknowledging that you have neighbors that really demand grass. I would say in HOAs, this is probably the option that you're gonna have to settle with for your front yard unless you have an HOA that you can really get on board with native gardens. Finally, and most combative, is you just ignore your neighbor. When you choose to go this route, I would strongly recommend you get with your HOA and or your city and you actually walk through your plans with them. Most cities and HOAs, they have plan review departments and they would have enforcement for weed codes would typically be kind of what you want to ask for if you call your city. Just ask to have a meeting with them. Bring your plans, bring your ideas, show them what you want to do. They can walk you through the local laws and requirements and they can kind of help you create a plan that's going to meet all of your city or HOA standards. That way, if your neighbor calls to complain, not only does the city have on record that you have worked with them, but you've also fully complied with all the laws. So you're fully ahead of any potential conflicts. You don't have to fight your neighbors, but you also don't have to give up on your ecological goals either. What makes a native garden look intentional instead of wild? It's really important to focus on the edges. That's really the big piece that shows people that this is a maintained landscape. So that may include keeping some of your lawn along the edges, especially around, say, sidewalks. And if you have a neighborhood with a lot of dogs, some homeowners can really appreciate this too, because that gives the dogs somewhere they can do their business. But just keep that strip of lawn, keep it looking very nice and well maintained, and that can oftentimes be enough to show that this is an intentional landscape and not an abandoned lot that the weeds have taken over. Some other really great things to do are signs. I love signs. They're a great way to educate your neighbors and communicate exactly what you're doing very quickly and without you having to actually interact and communicate this, which can get exhausting. And at times you just don't really want to explain yourself to somebody. A sign can cover it all by itself. Some other things that you can do are very regular maintenance, and you can even kind of communicate that maintenance to your neighbors through signs. But having like a spring and a fall cleanup can be great ways to communicate, hey, this is something that I'm doing intentionally. There's really no limit to the signs that show that you're maintaining your landscape. You can do patios, paths, you can do trellises, you can do benches. There's all kinds of ways you can communicate that care, but it all comes back to showing your neighbors that you are intentionally creating this landscape and it is something that is being maintained and cared for. But even if your garden looks great, is it worth all the stress of doing something different from those around you? How do you create a garden that helps wildlife, feels like home, and keeps the peace? That's by designing with care and leading with grace. By creating a garden that's beautiful and intentional looking, by sharing your values when you get the opportunity, and by being patient with those who don't understand yet, you're creating more than a garden. You're creating an example. And it's not about winning over every neighbor. It's about stewarding that little piece of land that you call home. It's about showing your kids what it looks like to care about something that matters, even when it's not easy. If you're ready to create a garden that's beautiful, supports pollinators, and fills your values, you can download my free garden design guide at naturalizeddesign.com, linked down in the description below. It'll walk you through how to create something that's functional and beautiful, all from day one. And after you've installed your garden, you may be wondering how you can keep it looking tidy and welcoming. Well, in this next video, I'm going to walk you through 3 design tips that'll keep your garden looking neat and tidy year-round, even to your pickiest neighbor. You can watch it here.